So we're just starting with purpose citations. We're getting started a couple minutes early. We got a busy schedule today, so I want to make sure we can try to fit everything in by 9:30. So James is going to start with his purpose citation, and then anybody else have any others? Peter, why don't you guys start first?
Sure. I've got one for Olivia in New Haven. She came down on Tuesday to cover as their greeter. Did a great job. I got a lot of compliments, and she was a real purpose promoter. So thank you, Olivia.
Hey, Jason Seppi.
Jason.
We cannot hear you guys.
Okay. No.
Yeah, we can now. So Peter, maybe just if you could speak up a little bit, maybe.
Sure. So mine is for Olivia in New Haven. On Tuesday, she went down to the Norwalk store to cover as their greeter. I got a lot of compliments on it. She did a great job. It was promoting purpose. So thank you, Olivia.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Any others?
Yeah, Mark, it's Jason. I have two. One for John Torrey. He helped work with a vendor to tag a phone line yesterday, and I wasn't there. He was able to help him out, so I appreciate that. He helped model behavior and do the right thing for the business of its own. And one for Heather Dean. She's able to help me with another vendor and get an answer right away, so I could keep working on an issue that we had.
Awesome. Thank you. Two others. Hartford Waterbury. Good? We're good? We're good?
I got one in Hartford.
Go ahead.
I have one for Rini. Good deed doer, tremendous teammate, solution deliverer. Rini has been helping me on the back end of WMS problems. I'm dealing with tickets and also dealing with me when I'm on my 10%. So.
Awesome. That's a nice one. Thank you, Will. Any other purpose citations? New Haven. Go ahead, James.
I have one for Jason Sebi. We had a project. I let go of the line 100%, and he ran point and came through and just went and did it without him.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have one for Kathy O in purchasing in Waterbury. She identified an opportunity to use AMB with another team member, and it was great, and real proud of her for that.
Awesome.
Okay, Mark, I got one in Norwalk.
Okay.
I got one for James. Good deed doer, thinking outside the box, tremendous teammate and solution deliverer. James designed, led point on design, led and oversaw the Norwalk showroom update. I mean, he was literally here, all weekend, 48-hour shift, going like the Energizer Bunny. So I appreciate it. The whole team appreciates it. Thank you.
Awesome. We all good with purpose citations? All right. New intros. Any new intros?
Yeah, we got one here.
Chad, you want to take that?
Yes, Paul. We've been training for the last week, so.
So Paul is training to be our Norwalk warehouse supervisor, and he's training here in New Haven this week, and we're going to look at today and see what the best avenue is to get him up to speed before he goes to Norwalk. But I'd like to kick it over to Paul a little bit. It was an extensive interview process on both ends, and I want him to talk a little bit about why he chose Bender.
Morning.
Welcome.
Yeah. So, I read the job description and I looked at it extensively, and it said, lead and manage and team empowerment. And then I looked at, the leader and act it out and roll up your sleeves and, make outcomes happen. So then I read the reviews about the company through, Glassdoor and other sites, and I read forward thinking and focusing on teamwork and up and coming continuous improvement and a good place to start a career. So then I met with Matt at the Norwalk at the first interview, and we talked about the company and the position. And then we took a tour, And as we took a tour, we were thinking about layouts and talking about, you know, the WMS, and he was very passionate about it when he talked about it. And, you know, we're looking at ideas and thinking about it outside the box, just right then and there. It's great. And, you know, I was getting excited. I was feeling comfortable about it, you know, and I wanted to be a part of a team like that, you know, a company that believes in the team from the ground up. You know, it backs their people as they're growing and learning. And, you know, I came from a different background. This is completely outside of my box. I don't know anything about plumbing, but that's what I want to learn. I want to be challenged. And so that's why I thought about Bender as being challenged and being, you know, learning from my mistakes and being backed by a company that believes in their people.
Paul, thank you for that. Let's give Paul a hand. So last week we worked on we show up on time, prepared, and ready. This week we're going to work on we give everyone a warm welcome. And there's one tip this week because I really want everybody to try to focus on this. If it's somebody new that you haven't met or somebody that you're introducing to the company or somebody coming into our company, introduce your name. So Susan, can you give a kind of a quick role play on what that looks like?
Yeah, so if we're going to look at it like from a greeter position or showroom reception or a greeter when they're welcoming new customers into the showroom, a typical warm welcome may be, welcome to Bender, how can I help you, which is completely warm and fuzzy. But to kind of amp that up, if you consider, welcome to Bender, my name is Susan, how can I help you? That takes it to the next level, where there's another comfort level, they know your name, so it kind of creates a connection, a deeper connection right off the bat. So that's this week's tip.
So a lot of people that, you know, we can all do that together and really make a difference in 1 week. And then moving forward, continue it, make it a habit of how we give a warm welcome. So I think that's a great tip. I want to spend a couple minutes going over some being in level 10 meetings, our EOS, some things that I heard this week and some people's excitement. And Jason, can you talk about the pink boiler and the opportunity you had to just talk to one specific customer and how that went? Can you give us a quick version of that?
Yeah, so we're thinking about ways on how to bring this promotion really out to our customers and a good way to present it. And instead of focusing on the product itself, we wanted to try to get a little bit deeper with it and have a good conversation. Like Lisa used to say, you know, it's okay to bring emotion back into the sale process. Not so much emotionally charged decisions, but getting people on a personal level. So I had an opportunity to talk with one of my customers and just asked them in conversation, has he ever had anybody, that's been affected by breast cancer? And obviously he said yes, and this one happened to be his sister, so it was really close to him. And it opened up a different kind of dialogue. It wasn't so much business to business at that point. It was more on a personal level. Did we get a sale for the pink boiler out of that conversation? We don't know yet, but that's not the main objective. It wasn't just for the sale. It was to build a deeper relationship and him remembering that, hey, I had a deep conversation with Bender, with Jason from Bender. So that was pretty much how it played out. Again, not focusing on the product, but just opening up a emotional window and having that type of conversation is something that probably other distributors and sales reps aren't doing.
And when I hear that, I just want to talk about, is that something that e-commerce or Amazon can duplicate?
No.
So think about that. That's not even possible. I sat in another L10 this week, and Heather got really excited about projects she's working on with inventory. Heather, do you mind giving us an overview of what that is and how that's going to affect our teammates?
So one of the things that we're doing in purchasing is the X items that we have globally. We're doing things like transferring them to other branches and getting them into the right places that they need to be, in addition to liquidating the X items. So with that being said, that's really a big piece of what will help us as a team to get the things that we need here and get rid of the things that we don't need and clean up a lot of the data we have. So that way when we are doing orders and purchasing, we can actually get the correct and right things that we need and not have to go an extra mile and weed through more things.
And just to put a little context to what Heather just suggested, our X item value corp-wide is just a shade over $4 million. And with Heather, Scott, and Rainey's assistance, we've to date tracked over $300,000 that we moved out of what would be an X item warehouse in say warehouse 1 to move it to warehouse 2, where it may have been an A or B item. So that's a significant production piece and a cost reduction as well, because we potentially could have spent that $300,000 replenishing inventory in a warehouse that we didn't need to buy it. So my hat's off to the team on that.
Thank you, guys. So today's subject matter is going to be time management. We show up on time, prepared, and ready, and a little bit of time management. And I want to give a little back end of why this subject matter came to play this week. I listen to a podcast every week, and sometimes they're great, and sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they're good, and sometimes they don't pertain to me in my space today or to us. And I watched this one, I was like, wow, that was really powerful to me. And then I got an email the next day from Sherry saying, did you listen to that podcast? That was really powerful. And I was like, all right, let's do something on that. And so before I start with, I'm going to kick it over to Sherry, but before that, I want to watch a quick video. So it's near Eyal is his name, and he is one of the most respected experts on intersection of psychology, technology, and business. So we're going to watch a quick overview video, and then we'll get into some podcast and what Sherry took out of this.
Author of Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life. You know, many of us find ourselves getting distracted by all sorts of pings, dings, rings, all these notifications and technologies that make us do things we don't really intend. So over the past 5 years, I've researched what is it that drives us to distraction, and I uncovered some pretty surprising results, starting with the fact that distraction starts from within. And that's the first step to mastering distraction, is to understand what's called our internal triggers, to figure out what it is that's driving us to get distracted in the first place. Then what we have to do is to make time for traction, to schedule our days to make sure we have time for traction as opposed to distraction. The next step is to hack back our external triggers. Then finally, we can remove these distractions by creating pacts and pre-commitments to make sure that we bar ourselves from getting distracted in the first place. So let me give you a few tips to becoming indistractable. The first step is to master our internal triggers. Now, internal triggers are these sensations, these feelings that we seek to escape. Remember, distraction starts from within us. And so what we are doing is when we use our devices, when we get distracted by something, is we are looking for escape from something that we don't like to feel. And so there are two solutions to this problem. The first, if we can, is to fix the source of that discomfort. Whether it's something at work that's bothering you in your personal life, if you can fix the problem, it must be fixed. But sometimes we can't fix every problem in our life. We have these negative feelings in our day-to-day lives that we can't always get rid of. So in those cases, what we need to do is to learn to cope. Let me give you a few practical tips for how we can learn to cope with these uncomfortable internal triggers. So for example, if you're feeling the pang of discomfort from boredom or loneliness or fear, fatigue, anxiety, what do you do when you feel that uncomfortable state? Well, psychologists tell us the first thing that we should do is to note that sensation. So inside Indistractable, I give you what's called a distraction tracker, where you can simply note exactly what it is that you're feeling. Now, many people will either become blamers or shamers. They'll blame the technology or the distraction, or they'll shame themselves and think that there's something wrong with them. But psychologists tell us that's the wrong approach. That in fact, it's not the technology. We shouldn't blame the technology or shame ourselves, but really we should look at the behavior itself. And what we want to do is to get curious about that internal state. What is it that we're feeling? Okay, I'm feeling bored right now, and that's why I'm turning to my device. Or this is a really hard project I'm working on, and so I'm checking email to take my mind off of it. and simply noting that sensation, getting curious about it, and then finally using what's called a 10-minute rule to do what psychologists call surfing the urge. Just giving yourself 10 minutes and you can have permission to give it into whatever distraction you'd like, whether it's eating that piece of chocolate cake that you know you shouldn't have or watching something on Netflix. If you give yourself just 10 minutes to get curious about that sensation, to note that sensation, think about it for a few minutes. At the end of those 10 minutes, if you still desire that distraction, you can allow yourself. Now, what this technique allows is that time to think about that sensation, and 9 times out of 10, you'll find that it crests, that sensation, that urge crests and then subsides.
Sherry, you want to talk about what your takeaways on the podcast were?
So, like Mark, I listen to this podcast, and same thing. Some of them are great, some of them are not great. So this one caught my attention because the title of the podcast was How to Align Your Calendar with What Matters Most. So I'm working on myself, and I'm like, great, I would love to help my schedule every day kind of be what I want it to be. So that's my mindset when I went into it. So I'm going to read kind of what I wrote to Mark so I don't get off track. When I chose to listen to this podcast, my goal was solely for the benefit of managing my work schedule better. But what actually hit home with me was how my distractions and lack of personal integrity was impacting my whole life. I really try to make it a priority to keep appointments when I know someone is depending on me. But when I do not give that same level of priority to my personal time that feeds my values and what really is important to me. What that looks like to me is scheduling time for lunch, scheduling time for reflection, setting time to schedule for my kids, setting time to be creative and strategic with my output. But I need to actually commit that time to a calendar and uphold myself to stick with it. I realize I leave too much time open to others to take because I've not claimed it, literally in black and white, and held myself accountable for it. I'm choosing to be stingy with my time and start to claim those minutes for purpose, no matter the size or task or significance. I'm committed to trying this and schedule time every week to look at the calendar to see if I allotted the right time and make adjustments so that I can, keep on schedule. My goal is to feel great at the end of the day, knowing that I set a schedule and accomplished the task with intent. Life is measured in time, so I need to protect it and value it. And it's true. If someone says, I was so busy, and you look back, and I do it myself, I try to keep a task list and I look back at it, I didn't accomplish everything on my task list. And at the end of the day, I feel like crap. I always say there's not enough time. But I'm the one that's, I'm the one that's not allowing that time, or I'm not the one that's making things a priority. So what the podcast, the tools that it gave me was to set up my schedule differently. Look at my day literally in time blocks. So if I know every day I'm going to schedule, from 9 to 10, do a certain task, from maybe 10 to 11, do a certain task, and stay with it, and then look back on it, maybe on Sunday, did I give myself enough time? Did that make sense? But hold myself accountable for it, because if I don't claim that time, someone else is going to claim that time for me. And it's not good for me or productivity or anything like that. So it had a really big impact.
That was awesome. So Nair created a word called indistractable. And his definition of indistractable, he says in the podcast, when you create a word, you get to create the definition. I think we're going to share this right now. So that's the word. And his definition is striving to do what you say you are going to do. So just think about that. Indistractable is striving to do what you say you're going to do. I'm going to give a couple of my takeaways, and then we're going to go listen to a couple pieces of the podcast. My takeaways were, why do we lie to ourselves and not do what we say we are going to do? Why do we blame electronic devices for our distractions? How can I better execute my task list and feel more self-worth? Make time for traction, our actions in life that move us forward. Doing the things we say we are going to do. Distraction is anything that takes us off track. So if I set up time to be on social media and I've allotted that time, it's not a distraction. It's only a distraction when I haven't allotted that time. If it's planned, if it's not planned, it is not if it's planned, it's not a distraction. Focus on the output versus the input. I need to focus more on the input. So we focus, as human beings, we focus more on the output than the input, and we never take time for the input. And then turn your values into time. So we're gonna watch a few minutes, about 10 minutes of this podcast. And then I'll send everybody the entire podcast. If you want, you can sign up. You go to the nearest website, it'll give you some tools to use. And then next week, I won't be here. Susie Gonzaga has offered to facilitate, and we're actually gonna look at some of the exercises Near has to help us with our time management. I think this is a big piece that everybody in the world can improve on. So that's why we're gonna take a few weeks to do this. No, you can share it first. You can share it. Because I know the calendar. You're already sharing it.
Oh, I am.
It's so interesting because I've worked with hundreds of people, and many of them will tell me how distracting the world is and how these technology companies are distracting them and building this addictive technology that's keeping them from doing what they need to do every day. And I understand this deeper psychology, but my first book was about this, right? It was called Hooked. I mean, I know very well. I've worked with companies to build habit-forming products, for good habits, not for frivolity. But, I understand the technology that's being used, and I understand the deeper psychology that's being used. And my first question will always be, wow, I'm really sorry that it seems like things are so distracting for you these days. But can you tell me, what did you plan to do with that time? What was the thing that you planned to do that distraction pulled you away from? And, the overwhelming majority of the time, somebody they'll take out their phone and they'll kind of sheepishly look at it, and, they'll look at their calendar, and I'll say, well, can I see your calendar? Can I see what distracted you, what you plan to do today? And it'll be blank. The calendar will be empty. Maybe a dentist appointment here or there, something, something like that. But the fact is, in this day and age, if you don't plan your time, somebody else will plan it for you. Mm. Whether it's something happening in the news, your kids, your spouse, your boss, Facebook, Slack, email, something is going to eat up your day if you don't decide what you're going to do with it. And so it's absolutely critical to do what I call make time for traction. So the opposite of distraction is traction. Traction are these actions that we take that move us forward in life, that help us do what we say we're going to do with intent. The opposite of traction is distraction, any action that takes you off track. And so, what we see today is that a lot of people make this simple conclusion that it's the technology that's distracting me, right? But in fact, if you plan time for those things, if you plan time to check Facebook, to watch Netflix, to watch the big game on TV, whatever it might be, it's no longer a distraction. It's traction because it's what you planned to do with your time. So I'm not one of these people who makes these moral statements that spending your time with some things is okay, but spending your time on other pastimes is somehow bad. No, it's only a distraction if it took you off track from what you intended to do with your time.
A lot of folks, when they're thinking about getting better at this, they start keeping task lists. And almost everyone I know runs a task list for something, or they run their day off a task list. What's the trouble with using a task list in order to define what's important?
Yeah, so I call this the myth of the to-do list. The myth of the to-do list says that if you just magically write something down, that it'll get done. And everybody, when you say it out loud, people realize how ridiculous it is. When I say this in front of a crowd, people usually giggle because they know exactly. Come on, this is so stupid. What? And by the way, I am guilty of this. I mean,
me too.
up until I wrote this book. I mean, this is what I thought. I thought I was being a very productive person. I write down all my tasks every day, and then I'm supposed to tick off the box next to each task, and as I do them. Well, let me confess that for years now, I would take yesterday's things that I didn't finish and put them on the next day and the next day and the next day's to-do list. And this went on forever and ever. And so, when I finally studied the psychology of distraction, what I realized is that, to-do list is an incomplete tool. If you just use a to-do list, you're really only using half of the solution. The other half of the solution is to make time for those tasks. That so many people are focused on the output. That's all they think about. I need to get this done, this done, this done. Well, those are outputs. But human beings are horrible at predicting output. There's been many studies that have shown that people are really bad at predicting how long a task takes them to do. So what I tell folks and what I advise is not to plan the output, only plan the input. Well, what inputs can you control? You know, there's so many exogenous factors to what you have to do for your job, what you have to do in your personal, professional life. And, you know, so many things can interfere with an output. You know, if you need to do a big report, a big presentation, well, you need the graphics from Marty and you need the data from Susan, and all these different parties have to align to get you to do the task by a certain deadline. So you don't always control all of the factors that go in that end in an outcome, but what you always control is the input of time. So the rule here is control for the inputs and the outputs will follow. So that means if you have something on your to-do list, you need to make time for it in your calendar, right? There needs to be a time and place where you will do what you say you're going to do. This is the whole crux of becoming indistractable, is making time for traction, making time for those actions that you are going to do with intent.
This is a game changer for me. I can't tell you how impactful this is.
Listen to the whole thing.
Like, seriously.
Yeah, we're gonna send that out. We're gonna fast forward a little bit. We're gonna listen to about another 6-minute clip, and that'll take us to the end of today. And then we'll continue this next week with some exercises. Just get it as close as you can. Perfect.
Are keeping a calendar down to the minute. And so that's why there's 4 main techniques to becoming indistractable. And one of those main techniques is to use what's called time boxing. You know, it's one of the most studied areas of psychology, is this idea of setting an implementation intention. Thousands of studies have now shown the promise, how effective it is to simply say what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And that's what making a time box calendar is all about. And again, this is only one of 4 techniques, so I don't want to overemphasize it, but it is something that's incredibly practical to do. Now, this doesn't mean that we become militant about every minute of our day. What it means is that we set a template for what our ideal week looks like. And then every week, you know, for me, it's a week increment, but, you know, for other people, it might be a month-long increment. It might be a daily increment. Depends on how frequently your schedule changes. You're looking at that calendar and you're assessing, hey, did I have enough time for the different things that I needed to accomplish? Did I have enough time for email, for meetings, for that presentation, whatever it might be? You're looking retrospectively at the calendar as opposed to looking in the future and just guessing. You're looking at it based on data, based on how did I do according to this calendar. Maybe I need to make more time for the things that I didn't get done. And so that's why this technique is so powerful. It's called making time for traction.
It's fascinating because I've found myself doing the same thing over the last few years. I still keep a task list, but I probably only look at it every 2 or 3 days just to catch like administrative stuff mostly. But for things that are important, it's blocking out time during the day to do it. And I want to come back to you on something you said just a moment ago, the ideal week. Tell me more about the ideal week.
Yeah, so this is where we have to start. You know, the when it comes to making time for traction, it really starts with understanding our values. You know, many people will talk a good game, myself included, about what's most important to them in life. That they say, oh, you know, my family is very, very important to me. My health is very, very important to me. But when you look at their calendar and when you see where do they spend their time, you know, it doesn't always reflect their values. And so the idea here is the first step is to define for yourself based on your values. And I'm not going to tell you what your values should be. If you want to prioritize work, that's wonderful, right? If you want to be in the office, you know, 20 hours a day, that's totally up to you if that's in accordance with your values. And it turns out if you take some time to assess those values, to introspect a bit about your values, and then you live out those values on your calendar. This is what I call turning your values into time. Like literally being able to visualize on your calendar where your values are manifested in your schedule, then this is what we have to do. This is the process of introspection to make sure that we align our time with our values. And it's starting with the center is ourselves. How do we spend time on improving ourselves? Well, we can make sure that we make plenty of time for sleep. We can make sure that we make time for eating healthy meals. We make time for learning, that, you know, we spend time with the audiobooks, with a course, with whatever it is that improves our mental well-being. And then the outer circle of that is our relationships, that we have to make time for our values to spend time with the people that we care about most. So whether that's our children, whether that's our spouse, whether that's people in our community, again, that time needs to have a place on your calendar, or as you and I both know, it won't happen, right? Especially these days where we have this epidemic of loneliness. We know that loneliness is as detrimental to people's health as smoking and obesity. And there is a loneliness crisis today in America, especially with the decline of civic groups and organized religion. The cost of that has become that we just don't get enough time to be with people who we care about and who care about us. And so the solution to that is to make time for your friends. And you say, oh, well, I like to be spontaneous. The fact is, if you don't make that time, it's not going to happen. So we need to do what I call planned spontaneity, right? Where we plan time in our day to get together with our friends on a regular basis, where everybody knows, okay, this is what we're going to get together. So I do this little friends group I describe in the book called the kibbutz. Every 2 weeks, we know same time, same place, we're going to get together. If you can come, great. If you can't come, then that's fine too. There'll be enough people around the table to have a discussion. And it's on the calendar. It's booked in advance. And then finally, when it comes to our workplace, this third circle, right? So in the center is you. Around that is relationships. Around that is your workplace. And this is where most people spend the majority of their day. Now, even there, we want to make sure that we spend our time in a way that is consistent with our values. So is it part of your values to constantly do reactive work? Perhaps. I mean, if that's your entire job is just responding to customer service requests, well, then that might be what your job description entails. And all you're doing is reactive work. But what I find, and I'm guessing is the case for most of your listeners, is that they require also some reflective work. And if we don't make time for that reflective work, all we're doing all day long is reacting. Between reacting to emails and reacting to meetings, we don't make time to actually do the kind of thinking that is required for creative problem solving. In this day and age, when so many jobs are being mechanized away, right? That artificial intelligence and robotics are, that we know what's in store for us, that all of the rote jobs of the future will be mechanized away. And so the only jobs that will matter and that humans will continue to be needed to do are the ones that require ingenuity and creativity. But we can't be creative. We can't design new solutions if we don't have time to think. And people in general don't make time to think. They don't make time to strategize about their life, about their business, about how they can succeed. It's amazing how many people will run to a book or to a guru or to a seminar when they could get so much out of their lives by just sitting down and thinking. Yeah. Writing down what you're processing in your mind. It's an incredibly valuable tool, but we don't do it unless we make time for it.
So we're at 9:30. Before I kick it over to Max to close, I thought what was so fascinating about this is it aligns with Purpose EOS, the vision of the company, values, behaviors. And again, I want to talk about next week and possibly the week after. I haven't done enough research to know what exercises we're going to do. I'm going to work with a team of people to do that. But next week, we're going to get more into this. I think time management is really important, that we spend some time in that and really start to understand ourselves and really value ourselves and take time for ourselves.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes, go ahead.
So what Mark said about this tying into purpose really hit home for me, because one part of being a purpose-driven company is making sure that our teammates aren't self-identifying with just the tasks of their job, right? We're more than that. We have a greater impact. We deliver creative solutions for comfortable living. And that is sometimes task-related. But more importantly, it's understanding the big picture. And I think that this was really, for me, a huge takeaway, is that reflection. You have to cut out of the tasks and understand the bigger impact. I'm not doing that. I'm a task queen, and I don't get anything done. So this is huge for me. I'm so glad you brought this to the table. Okay,
Thank
Max, it's your turn.
Max, you want to close us out? We apologize about being a couple minutes late, but I think this is such an important subject matter for all of us. Max, you want to close us out?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mark, so much for bringing this to the table. it's funny. He's talking about like the checklist and the calendar, and I'm like, oh, my calendar's full, and I plan my day. And then I look at my checklist and I see there's like 3 things that I've carried for the past 3 days. So there's plenty of room for improvement. No, that was awesome. I look forward to seeing the link for the podcast and listening to it over the weekend. And thanks for bringing this to the table. Everyone, have a wonderful weekend.
All right, high fives, everyone. Nice job.